wants to join the mob.
Betray me!
No, you betrayed me first, sweetheart.
I think that's a body.
General Hospital.
Port Charles is about to face another major shakeup, and this time the fallout could change the future of several familiar faces. Jacinda may be preparing to leave Port Charles, but her departure is not happening quietly. At the same time, Sidwell appears to be facing the consequences of everything that has happened, with a surprising 31-year deal becoming the center of attention. But what makes this development even more interesting is the question of what happens before Jacinda walks away. Could she leave behind information that changes everything? Could Sidwell's agreement reveal a hidden part of the story that nobody in Port Charles saw coming? And most importantly, is Jacinda's exit really the end of her connection to this complicated situation? The latest developments suggest that Port Charles is heading toward a major turning point. Jacinda has spent plenty of time creating tension, raising questions, and putting pressure on the people around her. Now, as circumstances begin to shift, Jacinda may realize that staying in Port Charles is no longer the best option. Instead of continuing to fight every battle, Jacinda could decide that leaving is the only way to protect what remains of her future. But there is a major difference between leaving and disappearing. Jacinda may be preparing to move on, but she could still have one final piece of information to reveal. That possibility has several people watching her every move. If Jacinda knows something important about Sidwell's situation, she could hold the key to understanding why everything has reached this point. She may not want to expose everything at once, but circumstances could force her hand. And that is where Sidwell's 31-year deal becomes especially significant. Rather than allowing the situation to remain uncertain, Sidwell could be facing a formal agreement that dramatically changes his future. The number 31 immediately raises questions because a deal of that length would represent an enormous turning point. For Sidwell, this is no longer simply about controlling the situation. It is about accepting the consequences and deciding what comes next. The biggest mystery is whether Sidwell willingly accepts the agreement or whether new information leaves him with very few alternatives. Either way, the people of Port Charles are likely to have plenty to say about it. Some may believe Sidwell is finally being held accountable. Others may wonder whether the agreement is actually hiding something much bigger. Could there be conditions attached to the deal? Could Sidwell have negotiated something behind the scenes? And could someone in Port Charles eventually discover that the agreement is not quite what it appears to be? Those questions could keep the storyline moving even after the initial shock wears off. Meanwhile, Jacinda's situation becomes more complicated. Leaving Port Charles could give her a fresh start, but she may not be able to escape the questions surrounding her actions and decisions. People may want answers before she goes. Someone could confront Jacinda and demand to know what she really knows about Sidwell. And if that confrontation happens, Jacinda may have to choose between keeping quiet and finally telling the truth. That decision could completely change the direction of the story. Imagine Jacinda preparing to leave when she receives one unexpected message. She stops, she reads it again, and suddenly her plans change. The message could contain information about Sidwell's agreement, or it could reveal that someone else has been working behind the scenes. Jacinda might realize that leaving without saying anything could create even bigger problems later. So instead of quietly walking away, she could decide to have one final conversation. That conversation may not be emotional in the way everyone expects. Jacinda could remain calm and simply explain that she knows more than people realize. She could reveal that Sidwell's current situation was not created by one event. There may have been a series of decisions, negotiations, and hidden arrangements that eventually led to the 31-year deal. If Jacinda confirms even part of that information, the reaction in Port Charles could be enormous. People who thought they understood the situation might suddenly realize that they were missing important pieces, and Sidwell may have to face questions he never expected to hear. The most fascinating possibility is that the 31-year agreement could actually create another mystery. What happens if Sidwell knows that someone else has information capable of changing the situation? Would he try to reach an arrangement with that person? Would he remain silent? Or would he finally admit that the situation has gone far beyond his control? These questions could make the next developments especially unpredictable. At the same time, Jacinda's departure could affect people who never expected to become involved. Her exit might leave unfinished business. Someone could discover something she left behind. It might be a document, a message, an old connection, or even a conversation that suddenly makes sense. What looked like an ordinary departure could turn into the beginning of another mystery. And that is exactly the kind of twist that can keep Port Charles guessing. Jacinda may believe she is closing the door on this chapter, but Port Charles has a way of bringing unfinished stories back into the spotlight. The question is whether she will actually stay gone. Could Jacinda eventually return with new information? Could she send someone a message from outside Port Charles? Or could another character track her down because they need answers? Any of those possibilities could keep her connected to the story even after she leaves. But before that happens, Sidwell's future remains the biggest question. A 31-year deal sounds final, but in Port Charles, nothing is ever quite that simple. There could be unexpected conditions. There could be a last-minute revelation, or even someone who believes Sidwell deserves another chance to explain himself. And if that happens, the entire situation could shift again.
One person who may be paying close attention is someone who has already questioned Sidwell's motives. They could notice a detail that everyone else overlooked. Maybe the dates do not line up. Maybe a statement does not match an earlier conversation. Or perhaps someone realizes that Jacinda's departure happened at exactly the wrong moment. That discovery could lead to another round of questions. Was Jacinda leaving because she wanted a fresh start, or was she leaving because she knew something was about to happen? There is a huge difference between those two possibilities. If Jacinda simply wants to move forward, her departure could bring a sense of closure. But if she's leaving because she knows that Sidwell's agreement is about to become public, then her timing could be extremely important. The people around her may start wondering whether she knew about the deal before anyone else. And if she did, why did she keep quiet? That could become the next major mystery. Eventually, someone may decide to confront her directly. Instead of asking whether she's leaving, they could ask the question that really matters. What are you not telling us? Jacinda may hesitate. She could look at the person confronting her and realize that the truth cannot stay hidden forever. Then comes the possibility of a surprising confession. Not necessarily a dramatic confession about wrongdoing, but an admission that she knew Sidwell's future was already being discussed. That one statement could completely change how everyone views her departure. Suddenly, Jacinda would not simply be someone leaving Port Charles. She would be someone who knew a major development was coming and chose to walk away before the consequences unfolded. Meanwhile, Sidwell could be preparing for a very different future. The 31-year deal may force him to reconsider his priorities. For someone accustomed to making decisions on his own terms, accepting a long-term agreement could be a major adjustment. He may try to maintain his confidence, but privately he could realize that his choices have finally caught up with him. Still, there may be one thing he refuses to reveal. Sidwell could know that someone else played an important role in bringing the agreement together. If that secret eventually comes out, the story could take another dramatic turn. Perhaps the deal was not simply about Sidwell. Perhaps it was also about protecting someone else. That possibility could explain why certain characters have been acting unusually cautious. It could also explain why Jacinda suddenly decided that leaving Port Charles was the safest choice. As the pieces begin to connect, everyone may realize that this storyline is much bigger than one person's departure. It's about secrets, choices, consequences, and the difficult decisions people make when their future is on the line. Jacinda's exit could therefore become the emotional turning point. She may leave behind people who are disappointed, confused, or suspicious, but she may also leave behind a clue, something small, something easy to overlook, and once someone notices it, they could begin putting the entire story together. That clue could eventually lead back to Sidwell and his 31-year agreement. If that happens, the deal may not be the ending everyone expects. It could actually be the beginning of a new chapter. Sidwell may have accepted the agreement, but that does not necessarily mean every secret surrounding him has been revealed. And Jacinda may have left Port Charles, but that does not mean her story is finished. The biggest question now is whether Jacinda's departure brings peace or creates even more uncertainty. Will Jacinda truly walk away and start over somewhere else? Will she reveal what she knows before leaving? Will Sidwell accept the 31-year deal without another surprise? Or will one final discovery change everything? Port Charles is entering a period where every decision could have consequences. Jacinda's departure may look like the closing of one storyline, while Sidwell's agreement may appear to provide a clear ending. But together, these developments could create an entirely new mystery. One thing is certain, the people of Port Charles are not going to forget what happened anytime soon. And if Jacinda really does have one final secret to reveal, the timing could not be more important. Because sometimes the person who leaves the scene is the one who knows the most. And sometimes the deal that looks like an ending is actually the first clue to what comes next. So, as Jacinda prepares to leave Port Charles and Sidwell faces his reported 31-year agreement, keep watching closely. There may be more to this story than anyone realizes. What do you think? Is Jacinda really leaving Port Charles for good, or could she return when her information becomes too important to ignore? And do you think Sidwell's 31-year deal is truly the final chapter for him, or is another twist waiting around the corner? Share your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned for the next General Hospital developments as the situation continues to unfold.